started the company in the summer of 2009 with the vision of making it incredibly easy for businesses to find, buy, and manage the cloud services they needed. And when we started the company, it was the height of the Great Recession. Businesses all around the world were struggling. Yet we realized that there'd be opportunities for businesses to find access to the software they needed in a subscription model that would make them be more efficient. And the biggest challenge we noticed at the time was, how do you connect businesses with the applications they need? And if you could find a local trusted provider that enables the business to figure out what apps to use, how to manage them, and how to buy them in a consolidated way, then we thought it would really create an amazing economy around the cloud.
I was reading an article about you that said, well, you were at Harvard and you couldn't get a job. Yeah. So this is sort of how the sort of idea happened. Do you want to sort of talk about that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I grew up my family had a furniture store, and I always thought that I'd go into the family business. It was around for over 100 years. My great-grandfather started it, and it was on Main Street in Niagara Falls, Canada. And, as my family had kind of grown the company, and I grew up kind of seeing my dad going to work every day, I had so much pride in his own business. We realized that, at the time we had to close down the business in the summer of 2009, right around the time when we were starting AppDirect. And really, I think the reason why there was so much challenge in the market is that my dad or my grandfather didn't have access to the tools and technologies that could enable them to compete with larger businesses. So a lot of the passion was from seeing the pain points that could be solved through cloud services. And at the time I was studying in Boston, and I was traveling back and forth between Silicon Valley and Boston, and I had an internship at an investment bank that allowed us to see what cloud services were all about, and that was when I first discovered cloud. But the genesis for how I ended up in Silicon Valley was I always wanted to be a banker in New York, and I interviewed on Wall Street at everywhere from Goldman Sachs to Morgan Stanley, and got declined in all those places. It was a really kind of competitive time, but really, that enabled me to get an internship in the Valley around a small investment bank that opened up opportunity to see what was going on. And really the genesis for the business was working with my co-founder Nicolas, who was at Bain & Company at the time, a management consulting firm. And Nicolas looked at it from one perspective, I did the other, and we brainstormed business ideas for years together, and that enabled us to essentially fine-tune growth.
I mean, you're now working with massive organisations, huge clients that every startup would love to work with. So, but obviously, in the early days, it must have been pretty tough to get people like that on board. So, how did you go about getting the likes of the brands that you work with?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the strategies early on when you're a company, in order to try to get big brands, is to drive credibility, reliability from day one. So even though when we started the company, we were a couple people in a room, our vision was to really be a global company servicing enterprises of all sizes. So we spent a lot of time professionalizing our approach and leveraging Nicolas's consulting skill set to be able to put together really comprehensive research and presentations on why an enterprise should drive the cloud. So by leading first with a thought leadership perspective, it gave us the credibility or right to play with the big players. And then as soon as we got our first customer, which was a large telecom, then many others followed, and it very quickly became a credible brand. So I would say that if I were giving advice to any other kind of startup entrepreneur, it's really from day one, try to professionalize your organization and be in a position where you can drive strategy and thought leadership to your potential customer market.
And what about funding? I know you recently raised another round of funding recently. How have you funded the business, and how has it changed as you've grown?
Yeah, I mean, we've been very fortunate to work with great investors, and as I mentioned, we started the company with the vision of building a long-term brand, and we aligned all of investors around that. So from our earliest angel investors to our first institutional investor, Inovia Capital, they've continued to support us throughout our growth. We most recently raised $140 million, led by JP Morgan, but with existing participation from all of our institutional investors, including Inovia, Starvest, as well as the Founder Group and Mithril Capital, which is Peter Thiel's growth fund, who was the first investor in Facebook.
And again, getting the likes of those kind of guys on board, does that also come back to the transparency and all of this, like getting a big client? Is it the same principle?
I think they're definitely similar approaches. So when we believe that it's very critical to build deep relationships for the long term. So when we get to know someone, whether it's an investor, a potential partner, a potential customer, or even someone who can work on our team, we typically take the time to understand the alignment of values, the alignment of vision, how we can essentially set ourselves up to mutually succeed. So whenever we enter into an agreement, whether that be with a partner, customer, stakeholder, or investor, we always want to make sure that there's win-win set up. So for an investor's perspective, we spend a lot of time thinking about the long-term vision, what their approach would be, what their investment thesis is, and that really allows us to work in a unique way that provides success and value on all ends of the spectrum.
I mean, you're now global, aren't you? You've got offices all around the world. I mean,
Yeah.
what size team have you got now? What's your...
Sure. So we're now north of 400 people with over 12 offices around the world. We have customers in over 125 countries, and are really focused on really building this global footprint and bringing software companies everywhere around the globe, therefore powering the global cloud economy.
What's your workforce culture? How do you with that many offices around the world? How do you manage your staff and make sure that the culture is consistent?
Yeah, so from day one we spent the time to define our values, our vision, and our mission for the company. So as I mentioned, what we do in the early days was really try to recruit everyone based on those values. Those 5 core values include True North, which is alignment for long-term vision, ownership, so the ability to really inspire people in the company to own what they're driving toward, positive mental attitude, so really kind of staying positive and passionate about what you do, intensity, really kind of working aggressively toward a vision and driving speed plus perseverance, and finally humility, so knowing to ask the right questions and knowing that you might not always have the answer and really having the humility to engage with others around that framework. So ever since our first few hires, we really found that it helped to hire, attract, and maintain kind of performance based on those values, and that's enabled us to scale the company regardless of if we were a startup, a few people working in a room, all the way to a global company. And the feedback we got from early team members was, if you ask them how much has the AppDirect culture changed as you've gotten bigger, they actually say the culture hasn't changed at all, because from day one when we were a really small company, we acted as a big company. So a lot of times at startups, the early people leave because they go from a hacker culture to a professional culture, whereas we really kind of maintain the balance between kind of innovative Silicon Valley company, but with that element of international professionalism.
And just finally, what's your big vision? You're valued at about $1 billion. You've hit that unicorn. You're one of the unicorns. What's your vision to get to the 10, 20, 50 billion?
Yeah, so our vision has always been to make it incredibly easy for businesses to find, buy, and manage the cloud services they need. And as we're doing that, we're essentially creating the destination where businesses go to access their services on an ongoing basis, and opening up the channel or opening up local providers to really help add value and add the human element on top of our platform. So by doing so, we really see that we're powering the global cloud economy and reinventing the way businesses work. And we want to continue to invest in our partners to be able to provide more value to their customers by driving things like single sign-on, so one password for all your apps, consolidated billing, enabling an experience where you can access all your data with interoperability from one place. You have one trusted person that you can call for all your software help. And we really think that will kind of globally change the way startups go to market, but as well the way businesses on an ongoing basis interact with their software.
I know I said it was the last question, but I've just got one more.
Sure.
We're in Europe, and we hear a lot in this part of the world about why the big value companies coming from North America, not coming from places like Ireland, the UK, France. What's your thoughts on what Europe needs to do to create sort of more unicorns?
Sure. So very early on in our company's growth history, we worked with European companies like Deutsche Telekom, British Telecom, Telia and others, and we were very early on committed to Europe. But what we realized is there is a certain element of Silicon Valley being ahead of the curve on cloud. So for the first 3 years of cloud, most of the companies that emerged, like Box, DocuSign, Microsoft, and others, were based on the West Coast of the US. However, now that cloud has emerged as a global platform, we're finding more and more companies starting in Europe and scaling for local needs. So when I walk around Dublin Web Summit here, we see amazing companies from Europe that are really ahead of the curve on innovation, on capability. So I think if we fast forward 5 years, we're going to see many more companies originating from Europe, serving the European continent but beyond, and really driving a lot of success. So I think it's really just a matter of that there was a catch-up timing in terms of technology. I think that the playing field has been leveled, and I think we're going to see amazing companies coming out of Europe and growing to be really big companies.